more ancient history jewelry stories. It's been a little while since I've had an occasion to talk about one of my favorite jewelry fanatics, Elizabeth Taylor. You may or may not know that Elizabeth Taylor had a sizable jewelry collection, and that many of the pieces she owned had quite a bit of history behind them. I believe that one of the oldest and most historically significant pieces she owned was a pearl pendant. This is not just any pearl. This is what is known as la Peregrina, which translates to the pilgrim woman or wanderer. This pearl has a history spanning over 500 years and was the favorite of multiple Spanish queens. Historical record states that this pearl was found in 1513 by an enslaved pearl diver in the Pearl Islands off the coast of Panama. I'm sure you can guess why these were called the Pearl Islands. Apparently, this was such a significant find that the enslaved pearl diver was granted his freedom. Pearl was first turned over to the then administrator of Panama, who of course was Spanish, colonialism, and was then gifted to King Philip II of Spain. He loved this pearl so much that he elevated it to the status of crown jewel. And as we see, multiple Spanish queens loved this pearl enough to feature it in some of their royal portraits, including Margaret of Austria, who, despite her name, was a Spanish queen, and Elizabeth of France, who, again, despite her name, Spanish queen. It changed hands a few times over the course of the next few hundred years, eventually ending up in the hands of one of the Bonapartes. Specifically, Napoleon's older brother, Joseph, who for a while was the King of Spain. It was then inherited by his nephew, Napoleon III, who eventually had to sell the pearl. At this point, in the mid-1800s, is when the pearl finally left the collections of the Spanish monarchy. The next 100 years of the pearl's history are not that interesting, but in 1969, the pearl was sold at auction by Sotheby's, when it was bought by none other than Richard Burton, who had a tumultuous on- and off-again relationship with Elizabeth Taylor. In fact, they were married and divorced more than once. He bought the pearl for $37,000 and gave it to Liz as a Valentine's Day gift. There are many photos of her wearing it, usually suspended from a pearl necklace. Apparently, Liz once lost the pearl, only to find it in the mouth of one of her puppies. Fortunately, the pearl was unscathed. One of my favorite Elizabeth Taylor habits is her propensity for wearing her own jewelry in her film projects. Here she is wearing La Peregrina in her film Anne of a Thousand Nights. Unfortunately, this pearl is now in a private collection and is not on public display.